Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Listen Up Girl podcast, your go-to podcast for LGBTQ plus news, culture, and the stories that actually matter. I'm your host, Zach Randles-Friedman, and today's episode, we have a lot to get into. We're talking about major shifts in queer storytelling, big casting changes in one of the most beloved LGBTQ plus series, a huge step forward in equality overseas, and so much more. But there's also hope, there's progress, and there are still people pushing things forward. So let's get into it. First, a heated rivalry shift. I want to start with something in entertainment because this one actually says a lot about where queer storytelling is going right now. Season 1 of Heated Rivalry was all about passion. It was about the intense chemistry, the secrecy, the tension, the kind of story that pulls you in because it feels almost forbidden. But season 2, it's about what happens after that. And honestly, that's where things get real. The creator, Jacob Tierney, recently talked about how the next chapter is moving into a much more serious territory, and not in a way that takes away from what made the show great, but in a way that builds on it. Because this time it's not just about hookups or attraction, it's about a relationship that's been going on for years and what that actually looks like. We're talking about pressure, expectations, the reality of trying to build something meaningful with another person over time, and something I think a lot of people in our community understand. That moment when something private starts becoming public. That shift can be scary because when something is just yours, it feels safe. But when it starts to exist in the real world with other people's opinions, expectations, and judgment, that's when things get complicated. The show is also introducing new characters, including one that's described as quite damaged, which tells me they're really leaning into the deeper emotional storytelling this season. And honestly, that makes me very excited because season 1 gave us romance and season 2 is going to test it. And that's where the real story begins. Now let's talk about Heartstoppers because there's some big news here as well. The upcoming Heartstopper film titled Heartstopper Forever is officially moving forward, but there's a major change. Olivia Colman, who we all love, who played Nick's mom and honestly became one of the most loved characters in the entire series, will not be returning. And that's a huge loss. There's no way around that. She's brought so much warmth and authenticity to the role, especially as a parent who truly supports and understands her child. But the reason is scheduling conflicts, not anything dramatic. And stepping into a role is Anna Maxwell Martin, who is a 2-time BAFTA winner and is very respected actress in her own right. So while there's a change, it's not necessarily a downgrade, it's just different. Also joining the cast is Derek Jacobi in a cameo role where he is a pretty iconic addition. The film is set to release on Netflix in 2026, and it's going to serve as a conclusion to the Heartstopper story, which means this isn't just another installment, this is the ending. And that comes with a lot of pressure because Heartstopper isn't just a show, it's something that a lot of people, especially younger LGBTQ plus audiences, have really connected to on a personal level. So how's the landing going to end? That's going to matter, and you will see soon and later in 2026. Now in Australia, blood donation change. Let's shift gears because this story is actually a big win. Australia has approved a major rule change when it comes to blood donation. For years, and I mean decades, gay and bisexual men, along with transgender people, faced restrictions that were rooted in outdated stigma from HIV and AIDS crisis. Now that's changing. The Australian Red Cross Lifeblood is moving to a system where everyone is assessed the same way, regardless of gender or sexuality. Same questions, same standards, which means people in long-term monogamous relationships are no longer automatically excluded. Honestly, that is what equality should look like. Not special treatment, not exceptions, just fairness. It's a shift from identity-based restrictions and towards behavior-based assessments, which is what experts have been pushing for years. And it matters not just because of access, but because of dignity. Now we go to Ireland with the Dublin Pride protest. In Ireland, something powerful is happening as well. Trans and Intersex Pride Dublin has announced its return for July of 2026. But this isn't just a celebration, it's a protest. The organizers have made it very clear that this is a march in rooted political action, solidarity, and resistance. Last year, around 10,000 people showed up, making it the largest march that ever had happened. And that turnout didn't happen in a vacuum. It's happening at a time when trans and intersex communities are facing increasing hostility, not just in one country, but globally. So this march is about visibility. It's saying we're still here, and it's about pushing back against the system that continue to marginalize people. Staying in Europe, teachers in France. Now, this next story is a reminder that even in places we think as progressive, things are not always what they seem. Two gay teachers in a small town in France have been dealing with years with anti-gay vandalism. It started with a message written out on their front door that basically said there was no place for them there, and it didn't stop. The harassment continued, and according to them, local officials haven't done enough to protect them. And this is one of those stories that's frustrating because it highlights the gap between legal rights and lived reality. You can have protections on paper, but if people don't feel safe in their own homes, that is a huge problem. Now we turn to Google searches, where there's a big concern. And this next story is honestly a huge concern, where people searched online for LGBTQ plus support resources, and some of the top results that came up is linked to conversion therapy. Yes, in 2026, these aren't neutral resources. They are tied to right-wing religious group pushing harmful and discredited practices. And the issue here isn't just that of those sites that exist, it's that they are being surfaced to people who are likely vulnerable, searching for help, especially young people. And that raises serious questions about how platforms like Google are prioritizing information and who gets amplified, because access to the right information can literally change someone's life. It looks like the right wing is probably going in and paying for ads and wasting their money to get parents or young people looking for answers on being gay or transgender, and they are pushing conversion therapy to them. Sick. Now let's talk about a case that could have major implications in the U.S. The Supreme Court is taking on a new case involving religious rights and LGBTQ protections. At the center of what religious preschools in Colorado can receive public funding while still refusing to admit LGBTQ plus families. The state says if you take public money, you have to follow non-discrimination laws. The church says they should be allowed to operate based on their beliefs. And this case is going to test where that line is drawn. Because it's not just about schools, it's about how we balance religious freedom with equal access. And depending on how this goes, it could set a precedent that affects a lot more than just education. Now, there's a new gay bar. So let's take a breath and talk about something a little more uplifting. A new gay bar has opened in Champaign, Illinois. And what's interesting is that city didn't have one before, which in 2026 feels surprising. But it also reminds us not every place has dedicated LGBTQ plus spaces. The owner said something that really stuck. She talked about how gay bars are about finding your people, your community, your sense of belonging, and that's true. These spaces are more than nightlife, they're connection, and that still matters. And I love it that the LGBTQ community is thriving now in Champaign, Illinois. So back in Boston, there's a bit of controversy around LGBTQ plus funding. A local group promoted a program offering wellness perks, including small things like yoga and creative services. But the city says the funding they provided was strictly for mental health support, not for those perks. So now there's confusion, pushback, and questions about transparency. And situations like this can get messy quickly, because when public funding is involved, clarity matters, and so does trust. Next, Andy Beshear allyship. So let's end on a positive note. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear is being recognized nationally for his support of LGBTQ rights. And that's significant, especially given the political landscape in the state. He's taken real action banning conversion therapy, vetoing harmful legislation, and consistently speaking out. And that kind of leadership matters. But allyship isn't just words, it's decisions. So thank you, Andy Beshear, for always being a support for the LGBTQ plus community. So today's episode really covered the full spectrum. We've got progress, we've got setbacks, we've got stories that inspire, and others that remind us there is still work to do. But there's one thing that's consistent. Things are moving, and conversations like this are part of that movement. If you're not following this show, please do. Share it with friends that you think would appreciate it, and be sure to leave a comment so these stories can get out to more people. Thank you for listening, for supporting, and being part of this community. I'll be back tomorrow with more LGBTQ+ news.